Hey Rob.
How you doing? Yeah.
So we are coming together today, you and me, to talk about first 100 days in labour, likely changes to employment legislation.
Yeah.
We're not legal experts. We're not employee relations
No.
or industrial relations experts. So we haven't got a view on everything. But I think we've got some interesting points on some of the things.
Yeah, they definitely have implications for people experience, and I think for data as well, which is obviously something that's very close to our hearts.
So one of the things I'm really interested in that's being talked about is the right to disconnect, and we've seen that in France. We've seen it in other places, and there's a lot of talk about that at the moment, both from a positive side and from a less positive side. And what I was interested to see when I reached out to your team and said, what data do we have on this? The team came back to me and said, we asked a question around, do I feel able to switch off from my work when I need to?
Yeah.
And the team were able to explore that through our PX3 framework and come up with some really interesting data points around what influences people being able to switch off from their work.
Yeah.
So I guess before we start, do you want to do a quick talk through of what PX3 is for anyone that doesn't understand that?
Yeah, PX3 is simply the framework that we use to design and analyse our surveys, and it's based on the idea that there are three, levels, if you like, of experience, and it's very much akin to what people will experience around things like communication, and it is there's the think, the feel, and the do. So the think is the perceived environment. What do people think, or what do they perceive of practices, policies, structures, how they're managed, all that sort of stuff. Then the feel, how do they actually feel in that environment? And then we have outcomes. So in this example, do I feel that I can switch off from work when I need to? We treat it as an outcome.
And this is important because if that comes in as legislation, employers can meet that legislation. Employers can put that into contracts. But if there's a conflict between an employee who doesn't feel they can switch off from work and their employer saying, well, we are doing everything we should do to ensure that you don't have to work when you're not supposed to work.
Yeah.
I mean, what's going to happen to somebody who doesn't feel they can switch off from work?
It's all very well when it's a choice. Choice is really important. It's when you don't feel that you can, then you experience a lack of control, and it's the lack of control that's generally the stressor here. Now, okay, if you're working even through choice, if you're consistently working late nights, not getting enough sleep, that sort of thing, then that's a stressor too. But the lack of feeling in control is a huge stress. So that speaks to autonomy. But the thing is, it's a really low bar, I think, for an organisation to sort of meet the legislation. Probably. I mean, I haven't seen detail, but we've seen sort of principle and broad proposals. And there's a very big difference for me between passively not encouraging people or not requiring people to check email, or do work outside of normal hours, versus actively putting things in place that enable them to make that choice.
I never asked them to reply to that email at 9 o'clock at night.
Exactly.
It wasn't me. We don't require that.
Yeah.
They've chosen to do that.
Exactly.
And you talked about autonomy, so I mean, it's worth jumping into what the data comes from that came out of the PX3 framework. So from the felt experience, the heart of the PX3, we saw that there was two main feelings, one around connection and one around autonomy, and that plays into what you were just saying. I mean, what more can people think about if they're thinking about this for themselves around those two areas?
Autonomy can be restricted by rules, but more subtly be restricted by things like workload, and just expectation, which is sort of an informal rule. And it's all very well, like if you could, to say we don't have a rule that you have to check your emails at any time. But if you've got norms that people do, to feel that you actually have a choice for some people that might feel really difficult. If you work in an international organisation, even if you've got a policy that says, in your own country you're not going to, send emails outside of certain hours. If you've got an international company, then what happens?
How do you manage that?
How do you manage that? But you have to have, you sort of have to have policies, and then you have to actually implement those policies.
Interesting on the autonomy piece, because I saw a LinkedIn post, made me scratch my head a bit, where somebody said they think this will fail, and they think it will fail because I feel like they were a bit of a return to the office advocate as well. So they kind of said, if you're not seen and you're not seen to be performing by the right people, you're less likely to get on or for people to think you're doing well. And the argument they were making was, if you're in the office and you're seen, you're more likely to be promoted. If you are working, you're more likely to be perceived as someone who is motivated to do more.
Yeah.
And it instantly, I hated it. I hated what they were saying.
That's creating a system that reinforces being always on. You've got to look at that system. You've got to look at your reward mechanisms. You've got to look at your definitions of performance. You've got to look at your leadership behaviour. You've got to look at how you assess people. You've got to look at all these different things, and to what extent they direct people towards a behaviour or not. And you can't just have all these things in place and then say, you can switch off when you want to. We're telling you can switch off when you want to. But everything else in the system is telling you can't.
Yeah, you will fail if you switch off.
Yeah.
Yeah. So good luck with that one.
Yeah.
And it does take us to the environmental factors, and there's 10 of them.
Yeah.
So watchers beware. So you talked about leadership, and there's a couple of points that I've put together on leadership. So when people think, or when people say that they trust the most senior leaders to act in the best interest of the organisation as a whole, and when they think that senior leaders care about the people that work here, those were two that came across as strong influencers of the ability to switch off from work.
Yeah, yeah. So you can see that trust would be an important one. So, there may be a policy that says that we don't send, emails out, or we don't expect you to be, available or responding to things outside of your working hours. But do you actually trust the leadership to, to stay true to that, to implement it? And then and then the thing about feeling that they care, that could be a two-way thing there. That it could be that when you believe that leaders care about you, you're more likely to feel confident to switch off. But it might also be that when I know that I can switch off, I feel that I believe my leaders care about me. So that the key thing about this stuff is it's our model, our framework suggests environment impacts upon experience, impacts upon outcomes. But there's sometimes actually what you see is just a relationship. There's an implied direction to a lot of the questions we ask, but sometimes you look at it and go, that might be, we have to sometimes keep that in mind. It might be the other way around.
And I guess, another point that was raised was that my organisation actively supports the well-being of its people. When people think that, and I guess that's linked to that care piece
both,
as well.
Again, that's kind of both, it could be both. It's, it's when I think the organisation is committed, I'm more likely to then actually, yes, I will act on it. I trust that I can actually do this.
When I can switch off and I can recover from the rigours of work, and I'm not needed to respond for performative measures or whatever, and I can recover and I can then be well. What it says to me is you care about my well-being. Yeah. Less about fruit. So
it's
in
both.
The office.
You see, and it's both. It goes both ways. Potentially that relationship.
So there's another one around teamwork, which is in our team, in my team. So it's about the individual team. We work well together to get results. And again, I think that plays into trust and competence.
It does, and it potentially also just means that I'm in a team where we get stuff done, and therefore I don't feel like I have to make up for it outside of ours, because I know that workload's in there as well, isn't it, as one of the factors. So, maybe in a more effective team, we get our stuff done. We all agree. We're all happy. We can all shut down. We don't need to be contacting each other. So it can be sort of reinforcing in that respect. Alongside autonomy, which we've talked about, there was also connection, wasn't there? So when people feel more connected, when they feel like they have more positive relationships overall at work, that's related to teamwork. But it's also related to the whole thing that, like, we're not in a dog eat dog environment here. It's not competitive. If we agree that we're not going to work outside of hours, someone's not going to go off and go, haha, I can be seen to be outperforming you because I'm gonna work at night, despite what we've agreed. And it's a safer environment to be able to do things like that in general.
Teams performing as a team towards team goals. Yeah. And it's interesting as well because you talked about the workload stuff, and I'd kind of bunched these three influential questions into a group, which was work processes make it easy to get things done. Belief that we have the tools and equipment we need to do our job well, and workload is manageable within the hours allotted to me. Yeah.
We see these things being connected time and time and time again, and to both engagement and well-being and that ability to switch off. Now, it's sort of obvious, but seeing these results puts it into stark reality that people are making up for inefficiency at work, poor processes, not having the right tools and equipment. People are making up for that, but they still have the
job to
objectives, and they still have professional pride. Most of the time, most people most of the time still have professional pride.
We've seen that. We've seen that in high purpose, high pride roles and individuals. Whether it's a teacher buying their own equipment for at school, or whether it is somebody putting extra hours in because they just don't have the time, or there's friction in the way of them getting their job done. We see that a lot.
And what they're doing, people are taking work home because of poor processes, inefficient systems, and all that sort of stuff. And then they're essentially letting their employer off the hook.
Wow. And it's interesting, isn't it? I love my job. I love what I do. I'm passionate about it. We want our people to love what they do. Well, if you genuinely want your people to love what they do, then let them switch off.
But it's really hard to do all that individually.
Yeah.
It has to be collective. It has to be, the role modeling is really important from leadership. You can't, it has to be implemented kind of consistently. There are always going to be some teams and things where, the work is like, out, eat with irregulars, but then don't expect them to be, give them the flexibility that they need to do the work they need to do when they need to do it. It's like I can't, if I work somewhere where it's the norm, it's not explicit that we can switch off. I am under pressure. Things are not very effective and efficient. I can't really, if I stand up and I'm the one person and I'm relatively, sort of junior person, I can't stand up and say, well, I'm not doing it. That's really hard. You can't expect people just to individually push back. And there will be individuals that no matter where they sit in the organisation will feel really strongly about it and may push back, and actually they'll be seen as a problem. But they're not. They shouldn't be.
Yeah, and we see it time. I immediately think I have a signature on my email standard, which is, I may not work the hours that you work. You may receive an email from me out of those hours. I do not expect you to reply. And there's part of me that says, I really like that. And I've seen it shared on LinkedIn, and I've seen other people share how they like that type of thing. But I'm also going, I wonder if that's almost a little passive aggressive of, well, I'm working late, but I don't expect you to. It's okay. And I wonder if permission has to be more explicit in an organisation than an email signature. It's okay to put an email signature there.
The email signature is a small part of an overall, jigsaw. But even the wording of that, if you say, at the People Experience Hub, we work flexibly, and therefore I may send emails out of outside of normal hours, just because rather than just because I'm working doesn't mean you should, because it could be a little bit, like, oh, I'm the boss and I'm working. Why are you not working?
There's a couple of other bits, three other influences that come through. I'm going to bunch them all up into one here, because I think, again, it deals in with trust and fair treatment. So change is clearly and openly communicated. If I were to raise an ethical concern, it would be dealt with effectively, and that there is fair treatment around things like pay.
Yeah, I'd separate out the communication one first, because on a simple level, like, you might have policies and you might have, tools and things that you might have things that are in place actually to protect people, to help people in that respect. If people don't know, they might as well not exist. That's and we see it time and time again. It's all very well having an approach, communicating effectively as part of implementing it effectively. And let's face it, we don't always, don't speak from a point of perfection here, but it's absolutely true. Then the ethical and trust dimension is, again, it's really important. There's that uncertainty that, they say we don't have to, but I've got quite a bit to do here. What's actually going to happen if I switch off?
And obviously the 10 things that I've listed is our aggregated data from many organisations, and every organisation will have a different set of those. Yeah. But it does feel like if legislation comes in for people to disconnect, it's a good thing. People should have time to recover from the general rigours of work, and that recovery enables them to be better at work because they are in a place where they can be fresh and not being impacted by the work that they've done. But that ability to switch off, if an organisation isn't showing caring leadership and leadership that is showing direction, communicating well, encouraging great teamwork, encouraging people to have the right tools, managers to enable that stuff, and fairness and being an ethical business, you're going to probably struggle when that legislation comes in.
The other side of all this is that it's so easy. It's so easy to be on your email. It's so easy to check it. If I go on holiday, I will make judgments. If I'm spent a lot of money on a holiday to go somewhere really nice with my family and stuff, I'm gonna switch off. I might not take my phone, or I might just switch my notifications off. But if I'm just taking some time off, I might choose to stay on top of things, to read my emails, because actually it saves me some of the stress of coming back. Because we all know that it can be stressful leading up to going on holiday and coming back from going on holiday. But again, that comes down to choice. But the impact of technology is something we're still a little bit struggling with, still wrapping our heads with. You put a mobile phone in the hands of someone, it gives them the ability to
work travels with me.
To work. And I think we should all be thinking about, does this person need a mobile phone? Rather than like having a company mobile being a perk or a sign of status, and I've seen all those things. I remember when we first got Blackberries.
I remember my first Blackberry,
and they were on the table because they went on the table because if you had a Blackberry, that meant you were a certain level.
I remember going into a meeting and seeing the Blackberries that the heads of had, and they were different Blackberries to the Blackberries that other people had. Shocking.
Yeah, and we should actually be saying, does this person actually need a mobile phone? Do they need to be contactable?
Yeah. Do they need the tools to work? Do they need the tools to be contacted and to make contact outside of hours?
We've got voice over IP. We've got the ability to speak for people to be able to speak. Take their laptop if they're traveling. It's actually really rare that there's certain roles that do need mobile phones and things, but actually we just give them to managers. Well, why don't we just think about taking them away unless they're needed?
And I think it's really interesting. There was a post on LinkedIn by Saurav Chopra, the ex-founder and CEO the current founder of Perkbox, the ex-CEO of Perkbox, and he put something up about some of the things he does on his phone, like setting it to grayscale from a certain time, digital sunsets and sunrises. And it made me think about what I do. And I have a Samsung phone, and I use something in there called modes and routines. And I have it set to, between certain hours, the screen is auto-dimmed, the notifications are all turned off. But I also have a geo setting, which is when I get home, my all my notifications that go to my smartwatch are turned off. That all of my email and work-related notifications are turned off. So when I'm home, I try and be present, and then I have to be actively picking up my phone and checking my emails rather than that ping of notifications.
And why not? If you've got company, if you're a bigger company and you're rolling out mobile phones to people that need them, why not preset them?
Enforce that policy. Yeah, it's really interesting. Well, it was great talking to you today, Rob. I don't see you often enough, just every single day.